That house is fucking cursed. Everyone who's gone inside has either gone missing, lost their mind, or wished they had. All I know is you should stay the hell away from it. It began with a challenge that should never have been accepted. The Dalton house sat rotting at the edge of town, swallowed by ivy and time. In 1986, a man named Thomas Dalton had butchered his wife and 2 children inside and vanished into the surrounding woods. The police found blood, but no bodies. Since then, no one had lived there. Even trespassers rarely lasted more than a few minutes before fleeing. Darren was the kind of explorer who mocked superstition. Abandoned buildings were his playground, decay and dust his trophies. When he heard the story, it felt like an irresistible dare. A forgotten house, a violent past, a chance to film something viral. The night he arrived, fog drifted through the trees like breath from something sleeping. The driveway was cracked and overgrown, the mailbox rusted shut. The front door hung slightly ajar. Every instinct told him to turn around, but ambition drowned out reason. Inside, the air felt thick, almost wet. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like burnt skin. A child's toy lay on the staircase, perfectly upright, dust-free. Every room looked abandoned mid-life. Plates on the table, coats on hooks, photographs tilted but still hanging. The silence pressed against his eardrums until it felt alive. As he moved deeper, his light caught faint handprints smeared along the walls, some small, some far too large. The air smelled of copper. Above him, the floor groaned once, a slow exhale from the structure itself. He continued upward, unaware that the house had already accepted him. The second floor was worse. The temperature dropped sharply, condensation formed on his camera lens. Beds remained made, but the sheets were dark-stained in patterns that looked too deliberate to be random. A photograph on a dresser showed the Dalton family smiling at a picnic, but the father's face was scratched out, gouged until only paper fibers remained. At the end of the hallway stood a door that almost looked hidden. Behind it, a narrow staircase descended into the foundation. The stench hit first, rot mixed with iron. Each step downward felt like sinking underwater. The sound of his own breathing vanished, replaced by a dull, humming void. At the bottom, a single bulb swayed from the ceiling, its filament burned out decades ago. His flashlight beam found the tarp. Thick plastic, stained, folded neatly. Beneath it was something human-shaped. When he pulled it back, the room tilted. The body was fresh. Skin swollen, mouth frozen mid-scream, eyes glassy and wide. Flies twitched in the corners. The corpse's throat was shredded as if its own hands had tried to claw the air. Behind it, a camera stood on a tripod, still recording, its indicator light blinking red. The battery had not died. Dust coated everything except the lens, as though something had been using it recently. Near the tripod lay a crumpled jacket identical to the one Darren wore that night. The sight stopped him cold. The stitching on the sleeve, the torn cuff, they matched perfectly. For the first time, he felt the house breathing with him, or through him. He left the basement in a blur of trembling light and silence that refused to end. Days later, searchers found Darren's car still running at the end of Dalton Road. Inside was his phone and a camera bag soaked in dew. The front door of the house had been forced open from the inside, splintered outward. No one answered when the officers called his name. The footage recovered from his devices painted a story no one could fully explain. It began like countless urban exploration videos, handheld, shaky light, narration in the background, then shifted. At the 40-minute mark, a heavy static rolled across the screen, followed by distorted shapes moving behind him. A shadow stretched across the wall, though no second person was present. When slowed down frame by frame, something faintly human could be seen crawling from beneath the tarp after he uncovered it. The final seconds were almost still. His flashlight dropped, beam spinning. The camera tilted toward the floor, catching a glimpse of boots, his own, and another pair identical facing him, then silence. No impact sound, no struggle, just static and the soft crackle of the recording ending itself. Investigators cataloged the scene, but never located Darren's body. The tarp remained in place, now covering two shapes of similar size. The video was archived as evidence, but copies began circulating online, each one slightly different. In some, an extra figure appears standing in the doorway behind him. In others, the camera pans for a split second toward the stairs as though someone else were holding it. The Dalton house still stands at the edge of town, padlocked and condemned. Locals avoid the road entirely, claiming they hear faint electronic beeping from inside on humid nights, a dying camera battery that refuses to die. And every few months, someone new decides to test their courage. They never upload again. When the city finally auctioned off 48 Crane Hollow Road, it had been abandoned for over 20 years. The listing didn't mention what had happened there, only that the previous owner had left the property suddenly and never returned. Daniel bought it cheap. He was a contractor and planned to flip it. The house looked normal enough from the outside. One story, pale blue siding, rusted roof vent, empty windows. But the moment he walked in, the air hit him. Thick, humid, like standing in a slaughterhouse after rain. He assumed it was mildew. There were dark stains on the ceiling, seeping downward in narrow lines. The smell clung to everything. Still, he'd seen worse. He worked through the day stripping wallpaper, listening to the faint creaks of settling wood. That night, as he locked up, he noticed a damp patch forming again, fresh dripping slowly down the wall he'd just cleaned. When he touched it, the liquid was warm. It was red. By the next morning, every wall had changed. The white primer he'd applied was discolored, wide patches of dark red seeping through like bruises beneath skin. The smell grew stronger, metallic and sharp. It wasn't paint bleeding through. It was blood. He scrubbed one wall until his knuckles bled. The stain didn't fade. The more he tried to remove it, the faster it returned. From behind the drywall came faint bubbling, a slow, wet, pulsing sound. He tore open a section near the floor, expecting mold or a burst pipe. What poured out wasn't water. Thick red liquid spilled across the floorboards, pooling on the floor. He stepped back, gagging. Beneath the dripping insulation, something pale shifted, something alive. He dropped his tools and fled, leaving footprints across the porch, the smell following him all the way to his truck. When he turned on the engine, the radio crackled with static. He looked to see the same red liquid oozing from the seams around the radio and out of the air vents. When police responded to the scene the next day, the front door was open. Daniel's truck sat in the driveway, engine cold, door ajar. Inside, the walls were clean, no blood, no damage, but the hardwood floorboards rippled faintly when stepped on, as if the house itself were soft and wet beneath. They found his flashlight in the basement stairwell, lens cracked, beam pointed at a patch of concrete darkened in the shape of a man. The rest of his tools were rusted, fused together with a reddish film that flaked like dried skin. The city boarded the place up again, sealing it for hazardous contamination. No one who entered afterwards stayed long. Visitors reported the sound of dripping from the walls, even when the air was bone dry. Neighbors say that on humid nights the siding turns darker, like something beneath it is still alive and moving, trying to push through. And when it rains, the house bleeds again. The Ridgecrest Hotel sat alone off an abandoned stretch of highway, its neon sign flickering through mist, the kind of place built for people who didn't plan to stay and shouldn't. Lena pulled in just past midnight. She hadn't meant to stop, but fatigue and fog had swallowed the road. Inside, the lobby was silent. The key she was given was brass, heavy, stamped 104. The room smelled faintly of mold and cold air. The TV was unplugged, and the walls seemed to hum. The sheets were damp, the lamp buzzed softly, and the silence pressed down like water. She tried to sleep, but the dreams came quick. Flashes of strangers in that same room, arguing, crying, dying. When she woke, there was water dripping from the nightstand, though every faucet was dry. She got the hell out of there as fast as she could. Well, she tried to anyway. The highway outside the motel circled back within minutes, bringing her to the same cracked sign and faded building. Each turn, each direction, the same result, the same number on the door, 104. Inside, everything was slightly different. The wallpaper seemed wet. The mirror lagged behind her movements. An unplugged radio whispered a woman's voice repeating numbers. Her reflection's eyes looked wrong, unfocused, almost vacant. Sleep brought her no rest. She saw others in that room. A man strangling someone, a woman bleeding in the sink, a child screaming behind a locked door. Every dream ended with her waking in that same bed, hearing slow breathing beside her in the dark. When she finally looked down, her hands were wet, the sheets stained red. Time broke after that. The hallway twisted endlessly, leading only back to 104. Her reflection froze entirely. The whispers became screams. In the drawer, she found a single Polaroid, a couple smiling in front of the Ridgecrest sign. The man's face was scratched out. The woman's face was hers. Police footage later showed her standing outside room 104 at 3:17 a.m., still in her travel clothes. The door opened. She stepped inside. She never came back out. The next morning, the room was empty, except for the mirror, fogged from the inside, marked with the words, "I dreamt of you too."